You've joined us for a journey to Glacier Station at mile 14. If you would like to follow along with our journey today, I invite you to look at the all aboard pamphlet we've placed on each of your seats. This unfolds and it's a rail map, so you can kind of see where this train goes and what to expect along the way. You may notice that this rail map goes all the way 110 miles up. We currently don't operate all the way to Whitehorse anymore, and we do have a bridge that's out of service at mile 15. Since this bridge is out of service, we will have to turn around at mile 14 and then head on down into Skagway. Now, today we are riding on a very real, historic narrow gauge train up a very real mountain. As you can imagine, safety plays an important role in our operations. Please pause all conversations and lend me your undivided attention as I go over our brief safety announcements. First and foremost, our number one safety rule of the day is that there is absolutely no crossing from car to car. The coach that you're currently in, this will be the one you stay in for the remainder of our excursion today. You'll notice that each coach is connected by a thin metal bridge. This is called an apron. It's designed to move freely with the flow of the train. It shifts around quite suddenly and unexpectedly at times. It is for this reason and for your safety that we ask that you please do not cross from car to car. Now, inside each of our coach cars, there is a very real kerosene burning stove. These stoves have been lit this morning, and some of them may still be on. If at any point in the journey today you are uncomfortable with the temperature inside your coach, please let one of our staff here on board the train know, and we will do what we can to assist you with that. Now, as our train gets moving here, you'll notice there's a nice rocking motion to it. Now, this has a tendency to throw people off balance, so I recommend using 3 points of contact as you're walking through the coach, whether that be a nice wide stance and maybe a hand on one of the seat backs. Be careful where you're placing your hands, though, and fingers when you're near the open doors or windows at the front or back of each coach. Sometimes this rocking motion and the gusts of winds that we experience here, they can cause these doors to slam shut with a surprising amount of force. We don't want your fingers to be caught in that crossfire, so please just be aware of where you're placing your hands. I would like to give a special welcome for anybody joining us today under the age of 16. Welcome aboard. At this time, though, you'll need to pick your favorite responsible adult. They will need to be with you at all times, especially when you want to go outside and check out those platforms, which again are closed momentarily. Now, there is absolutely no smoking allowed on board this train. That's inside, outside, moving, or stopped in that bathroom as well too. This does include the use of electronic cigarettes or vaporizers. If any of our train crew sees that you're smoking, we'll just have to assume that's because you've caught fire, and we will do what we can to put you out. There is also no consumption of alcohol allowed on board the train. If you did bring a little extra beverage with you, please keep that tucked away and be courteous to your fellow passengers. I know I'm no fun at all, but thank you so much for your cooperation. All right, and lastly, it's on everybody's mind, and it should be on everybody's face: masks. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is a mask-required excursion. We are required by the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, to have all of our train crew and passengers having a mask covering their nose, mouth, and chin for the entire duration of the journey. I can understand if you're pretty sick of hearing this. Believe me, I am too, but we do appreciate you so much for your cooperation with this. It helps keep our small community safe and our operations up and running. All right, that does it for safety. Thank you so much for your attention there. Now I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mary, and I will be the tour guide for our journey today. I'm in about the middle of the train, giving the tour over our sound system here. Now, I am joined on board the train by two other fantastic roaming guides. Now, these two tour guides. They've been here with us for many, many years, longer than me, actually. Both have about 5+ years. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And their names are Tyler and Lindsay. Now, in charge of our train crew today is our conductor. His name's Mr. Jeremy Simmons. Assisting him is our brakeman, Mr. Chris Williams. And the man whom we won't see on this train, well, hopefully we won't anyway, we want to make sure he stays up in those diesel-electric locomotives, is our engineer. Our engineer today is Mr. John Westfall. You're in really good hands today. This train crew has lots of years of experience, I believe over a century. Now, as your tour guide and narrator today, I'll be pointing out landmarks and sharing with you a brief history of this railroad's construction. And I can't do that without talking just a bit about the Klondike Gold Rush. Back in the year 1897, all across the country, the headlines rang out, "Gold, gold, gold in the Yukon." Men came by the thousands to Skagway, Alaska to begin an arduous 600-mile journey up and over these surrounding mountains to get to their destination of Dawson City, where those gold fields were. Now, this railroad was originally built to help these eager gold seekers transport their supplies, but then we became a northern transportation empire. Today, we'll see what most of these men saw. Just the beginning of an incredible adventure. The Klondike fever that spread like a wildfire across the nation caused men to delay weddings. They would leave their families behind. Some would even mortgage their homes in order to afford a ticket and the required goods. Coming up on our right-hand side, we'll soon be passing by Skagway's Gold Rush Cemetery. As you can imagine, a life here in Skagway in 1898 was very dangerous. If you survived the harsh White Pass Trail, diseases like tuberculosis or meningitis, or even foul play from the gangs of Skagway were waiting for you in town. Now, several of the graves in this cemetery are marked unknown, and they belong to some of those gold seekers who died in mostly tragic circumstances. It's heartbreaking to think about the friends and family members that will never know exactly what had happened to them on their quest to strike it rich. we travel up this beautiful valley that's been carved by glaciers thousands of years ago, we'll be traveling through a small section of the Tongass National Forest. I do say just a small section because the Tongass is one of the largest national rainforests. At 16.7 million acres, it covers most of southeast Alaska. Coming in and out of view on our left-hand side will be the churning waters of the Skagway River. Now, this is a glacial-fed river, and that is why it has a kind of unique coloration to it. As these glaciers move and travel over valleys over the course of thousands and thousands of years, they pick up and grind down pieces of the granite through this area. As they melt, they are depositing that granite into the river. And it's in such a fine consistency, they call it rock flour, so to speak. And it's for that reason, though, that this river has a unique, milky almost color to it. Just a couple quick reminders here. There is absolutely no crossing from car to car. There's no smoking while outside. And also, children need to be accompanied by a responsible adult at all times. Now, with that being said, you are more than welcome to head outside and visit the small platforms on the front and the back of each coach car. Please be courteous to your fellow passengers and share that limited platform space. You won't be able to hear my narration out there as well, as there are no speakers. This is intentional in the hopes to encourage you to rotate in and out. Chances are, if you're out there taking a great photo, there's probably somebody right behind you trying to get that same shot. With that said though, all those platforms are now open. Now, part of my job as your tour guide here on board the train is to cue you up for the good photo opportunities as they come by. I'll be doing so that those of you who are in the very top car behind those engines have the same chance to get your cameras out and ready. Keep this in mind if you're towards the middle or the very back of the train. You'll notice a delay with seeing what I'm talking about. With that said though, we are coming up now on our first great photo opportunity of the day at Denver Station, mile 5.8. We'll be making our first crossing over the Skagway River here. Our full train set is going to curve nicely off to the left-hand side. If you're looking for a photo of the train in motion, keep your eyes peeled over there. Before we cross that bridge, on the right-hand side, you'll notice a little red caboose. Now, this caboose has been donated from our rolling stock to the National Forest Service, and it's been converted into a cabin to actually house overnight hikers. So, Denver Station here, this is an actual flag stop for our train. Occasionally, we'll stop here to pick up or drop off hikers wanting to explore further up the Denver Valley. But really, ladies and gentlemen, whatever side of the train you are currently sitting on, I recommend enjoying the view looking out that side. Because once we reach our halfway point, you'll be switching sides and you'll get to see it from the other side. So, can't go wrong with whatever side you're on. Just enjoy the views. Here they come. We're at Denver Station now.
Oh, we're good. No, we're good. I'm just gonna reach out. I did this a couple times. Have you before? Not here. Hey, the rest of the stuff. I'm going to school that. That's not fun. Drop the clock and go to the actually, yeah, free to school. You get to the school and you have to say, here's your jurisdiction.
In the year 1896 that triggered a worldwide media blitz. Now, because of how remote the area was, it took 11 months for word to hit the newspapers. With their hopes high and imaginations running wild with dreams of gold, men immediately set off in search of it. Unaware of the harsh realities they would face once they landed on the shores of Skagway or Dyea, most hadn't even bothered to look at a map before hopping on the steamship, and they were ignorant to the fact that the gold was never found here in Skagway, but it was another 600 miles away. Now, the first 40 miles of this long journey, it had to be hiked with heavy wooden packs, and these men, once they completed that, they had to construct a boat that would not only carry them, but all of their required goods another 550 miles through a series of lakes and rivers onto Dawson City. Now, there was no way they could have known that for most, their efforts would be in vain. So why would anyone want to leave the comforts of their own home and their families behind? At the time, the United States, it was in an economic depression. And after the year 1893, some were desperate to try and regain a sense of financial security. The quest for the Klondike, it became synonymous, not only with the promise of fabulous wealth, but also with the opportunity for a bold frontier adventure. The Klondike was to be the last great adventure of the century and the last great American frontier. Soon, their dreams of riches would erode into a brutal and desperate quest to survive.
Hi guys, how you doing in here? Good. My name is Lindsay. I'm the roaming guide on the back half of this 16-car train. I'll be in and out of these cars, so if you have any questions about Mary's Tour, Skagway, anything else, stop me and ask. You have a restroom here, you can use it anytime, and free bottles of water in the back of your coach. Help yourself, and I have extra maps if you did not get one, and some in foreign language form if need be. Other than that, enjoy the ride, guys. It's really pretty up here today. And thanks for coming to Skagway. We appreciate you all back. I know, right? Finally.
Coming up on our left-hand side, we'll come to about 2 clearings in the trees. The first one is just to get you ready, and the second one will you will see a wonderful view looking all the way down into Skagway. Now, once we get about to the midway point of that second clearing, don't forget to turn around, look all the way behind you, and you'll be able to see the beautiful Denver Valley and that bridge that we just crossed over. We've gained about 200 feet of elevation in this last mile alone. As we roll into the second clearing here, keep your eyes peeled for your cruise ship, the Ovation of the Seas. The construction of this railroad began on May 28th of 1898. 2 months later, the first passenger train rumbled out of Skagway. These guests were dressed in their finest, and they consisted of Skagway's leading citizens. Loaded up on flatbed cars fitted with benches, they all wanted a closer look at the first major obstacle facing this railroad's construction: Rocky Point. This area we're traveling through now, this was once a 120-foot high, 20,000-ton plug of solid granite. And it took about 250 tons of black powder to dislodge enough rock to lay the 16-foot wide rail bed. To put that into perspective, that would fill about 44 of our passenger coaches all the way to the top with black powder. Now, coming into view for the front half of the train, looking across the valley here, we can see the South Klondike Highway. Now, this is where the original route of the White Pass Trail ran. The White Pass Trail was promoted as a wagon road by Skagway's original homesteader. But in reality, this was little more than a treacherous footpath. To the inexperienced men and women all climbing up and over this White Pass Trail, this was advertised as the easy route where animals like horses, pigs, and dogs could be used to pack your goods. Men like George Brackett would take advantage of their naivety, and he began building a wagon road. Now, although he had just begun building this road, he started charging tolls to use it. Now, Brackett's wagon road was crucial to the construction of this railroad. It actually allowed our crews to leapfrog ahead of Rocky Point and continue working on the rail grade on the other side. Looking sharply down on the left-hand side, about 40 feet below the grade, you may notice a rocky ledge and a white sign that marks Brackett's Toll Road. we can see across the valley here, this helps make Skagway a unique community here in Southeast Alaska. We are one of only 3 towns that you can travel to by road here in Southeast. The other 2 are Haines and Hyder. Now this South Klondike Highway, if you were to take this from Skagway, you could go 110 miles north to get to Whitehorse, the capital of Yukon Territory. From there, that road connects to the Alcan Highway system, and you can take that further into Alaska or down to the lower 48. For the residents of Skagway like myself, to get to our nearest movie theater or fast food joint, well, we gotta drive that 110 miles through. We have to go through Canadian customs as well too. So at that point, it's not really fast food. Now, this highway, it wasn't around during the days of the gold rush, obviously. This was built back in the late 70s, the 1970s. And once the construction was completed, it took away a lot of the business for our freight trains. We actually experienced a shutdown here at White Pass for several years. When we reopened in the year 1988, it was strictly as a passenger train only. The furthest that we maintain our tracks, if you're looking on those rail maps, is Carcross. That's 67 miles north of Skagway. Now, for our trains to get to Carcross, that's usually a 6-hour one-way journey. You might begin to see a teal-roofed building. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, that looks like an IHOP. Well, it technically is an IHOP. The International House of Passports, that is. This is the U.S. Customs building. So the actual border between Alaska and Canada, it is still another 12 miles ahead on that road there. But due to the lack of space and the harsh weather conditions that prevail up at the summit, they decided it was in everyone's best interest to build it down here. Now, just under that customs building, you may notice a bold phrase written on the rock face. It says, "On to Alaska with Buchanan." Now, George Buchanan's story has nothing to do with the Klondike Gold Rush, nor does it have anything to do with the construction of this railroad. However, it's a nice story, so I like to share it. So George Buchanan, he was a wealthy coal baron from Detroit. When he was brought up in his youth, he was taught the value of earning and saving monies. This helped fulfill his life's goals, and he wanted to help instill these values in the youth of Detroit as well. And he did this by sponsoring adventure trips to Alaska. Now, to go on the trip with George Buchanan, the boys had to earn 1/3 of the cost of the trip themselves. Their parents would contribute whatever they could, and then their parents, or George Buchanan, would step in and he would cover the rest of that trip. They did many things together all across the state of Alaska, but part of their journey was to travel to Skagway, ride our train the 110 miles up all the way to Whitehorse, and then continue on from there. And these trips, they happened back in the 1920s and 30s. is off to the left-hand side of the train. But for those of you who are sitting on the right-hand side, I don't want you to feel left out. There are actually several seasonal waterfalls through this next mile or so area. So have your cameras ready, pointed off to the right. You're trying to get a quick shot of one of these waterfalls. They'll come and go pretty quickly here, and I can't point them all out because of the rainfall we've experienced in the last few days. Some of these weren't here a few days ago. So keep your eyes peeled, and I can cue you up for one good waterfall that I know will be there. So keep your eyes peeled for a camouflaged pipeline. Now once you see this camouflaged pipeline, about 30 to 40 seconds later, the rocks will get really, really close to the train, and then it will break open into a little slot canyon to reveal Pitchfork Falls. Again, you're looking for a camouflaged pipeline. About 30 to 40 seconds later, on the right-hand side is where you'll see Pitchfork Falls. Videos are probably the best way to capture this, or burst mode. Otherwise, just enjoy it with your eyes, like I do. construction for this railroad, the 110 miles of track, it took 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days to complete it all. Now, in that time, there were about 35,000 men who would be on the payroll of the White Pass. Some of them just working for a short time, maybe just a day or two, before they'd earned enough money to continue on to the gold fields Well, realizing they'd bitten off way more than they could chew with this journey that lay ahead of them, they just wanted to afford a ticket back home. This was very hard and dangerous work, but surprisingly, there were only 35 recorded deaths due to this railroad's construction, and most of those were due to illness rather than injury. However, we are approaching the site of a fatal railroad accident for 2 of these workers. Al Janot and Maurice Dunn were working on August 3rd of 1898, drilling holes into a rock that overhung the railroad grade, when unexpectedly an estimated to be 500-ton boulder broke loose and it fell on these 2 men and their pack animals. After much consideration, the rail line foreman, Michael J. Heaney, decided that no attempts would be made to remove their remains and move this boulder aside. And instead, a black cross would be placed atop it to serve as a memorial for all the men who would give their lives to this railroad's construction. So, to see Black Cross Rock, begin looking sharply down off to the left-hand side of the train. As we get to a clearing, there will be a white sign saying Black Cross. Once you're about parallel with it, if you look sharply down, you'll be able to see the Black Cross and a bouquet of yellow flowers. From there, expand your gaze and you'll be able to see a triangular shape and realize that the ground that cross is sitting on is that estimated to be 500-ton boulder. Men like Michael J. Heaney were instrumental to the completion of this railroad. When the original investors had sent a team of engineers to survey the White Pass Trail, the future of this railroad looked grim. Although these engineers were skilled and they had much experience, they confessed building a railroad over this steep mountain pass was beyond their capabilities. By chance, these men had ran into Michael Heaney after he had conducted his own survey of the White Pass Trail. Over whiskey and cigars, they soon found out that Heaney was an experienced railroad builder, and he was confident that not only could a railroad be built, but he was the man to get it done. His reputation was that he could drive men, beasts, and machines to the limits of their endurance to get the job done. He would often be found pacing the rail line in all times of the day, in all types of weather conditions, ensuring that quality work was being done, usually by setting the example himself. He is quoted for saying, "Give me enough dynamite and snooze, and and I'll build you a railroad straight to hell. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term snooze, that is a term referring to chewing tobacco. You see, Heaney was a stickler for safety. He didn't allow any of his workers to smoke cigarettes because of the large quantities of black powder that was everywhere. So instead, he provided snus for all of his workers. To get a glimpse through the trees on the left-hand side of our next great photo opportunity, Bridal Veil Falls. In just a few moments, we will get to a clearing in these trees where you will have an unobstructed view of this incredible sight. It is only from the rail line that we can see the entire Bridal Veil Falls as it plummets down nearly 5,000 feet in elevation from the Carmack Glacier up above down to the Skagway River below us here. Now have your cameras ready, pointed across the valley. The very first part of this clearing is where pictures turn out the best. And if you're trying to avoid some of the glare in the glass, I recommend pushing your phone all the way up against it. I do want to mention though, my recommendation personally here is to spend at least one of these trips, either north or southbound, to enjoy this beautiful waterfall just with your eyes. But here she comes, ladies and gentlemen, the Bridal Veil Falls, soon off to the left. over these mountains and then arriving up into the Klondike region, the Canadian government was horrified by the near starvation conditions that prevailed. Now, after the first winter, they decided that each and every prospector entering into Canada, they had to have with them 1 year's worth of provisions. This became known as a grub stake or the ton of goods, because it quite literally weighed 1 ton. The government, they came up with a very long and very specific list of goods consisting of things like beans, bacon, flowers, saw, a gold pan, even down to spare buttons. They tried to think of everything these inexperienced men would need to survive the harsh winters in the Klondike region. Now, for most of these men, that meant that the first 20 miles of this journey, going from Skagway to where the Canadian border would lie, was spent going back and forth, up and down, hauling load after load of all of your supplies. Once you got all of your goods checked off, and then you could cross and enter into Canada, well, you had to do the same thing for another 20 miles. Once you reached the shores of Lake Bennett, that's where the journey by land ended and the journey by water began. So the first 20 miles of this already very long journey was probably closer to 800 miles. Now, I could only imagine like a train ride like we're experiencing right now was fantasized by many of these men as their heavy wooden packs dug into their tired and weary shoulders. I'd like to direct your attention out of the train to the left-hand side and slightly ahead of us. Just above us, you may notice a line in the mountainside up there. That is in fact our rail line. Soon we'll be able to see our wooden trestle bridge. This trestle bridge was completed in the year 1900. Of course, all of the wood and lumber has been replaced throughout the years. Now, what we're looking at up there, that is our highline section of track. And just south of that wooden trestle is where our bridge is out of service. Bridge number 15A is being replaced with a concrete retaining wall this year. They decided to start this project earlier this spring, before we ever knew we'd have any cruise ships here in Skagway at all. So he surprised us a little bit, but if you look across here where all the heavy equipment and machinery is, you may notice a large yellow crane. You'll understand why we won't be making that jump over the gap today. Now at this point you may notice that we won't be going through any of our tunnels today. If you'd like to go through one of those tunnels, well, we can do this pretty easily on our own. Go ahead and close your eyes. Cover your hands with both of your eyes for about 23 seconds. And that is the experience of riding through a tunnel. Klondike Gold Rush had brought all different types of people through all walks of life through this small valley. I was overwhelmed my first year as a tour guide here by the amount of stories that all differed so much from one another. It was really quite challenging to figure out the best stories to tell here on the train. But there is one that I encountered my first year that I still love telling even to this day. And it's about a lady named Barbara. I don't know a whole lot about Barbara. I don't even know what her last name was. But I do know that Barbara happened to be down in Seattle visiting a friend when her daughter had sent her money to return back home, wherever that was for her. But Barbara, like any responsible woman, she took that money and she purchased herself a one-way ticket to Skagway, Alaska. Now, when she arrived here in town, she quickly found work working for the News Depot. She sold newspapers among the dance halls and the gambling houses. She seemed to have a knack for it too. She could find the particular gentleman who was in need of one of her newspapers to hide his poker face. Now, the first little bit of money that she had earned and saved up, she used this to purchase a piano box. Now, when I read this, I was just imagining a very large wooden crate. And she got permission from a store owner. She placed this out back. And this is where Barbara lived for the rest of her stay here in Skagway. She lived out of a wooden box. She became so well known and well loved around town that folks would only buy their newspapers from Barbara. She was here for only 5 months, but she did pretty well for herself. She earned about $3,650. If you translate that to today's currency, that's just shy of $120,000. Again, earned in only 5 months. Now, that's not why Barbara's my favorite, but Barbara's my favorite story to tell because she was 76 years old when she came to Skagway for the first time. She said, all my life I'd wondered what it would be like to go out among complete strangers and make my own way. I always wanted to try and never had the chance. So when I got that chance, I took it. I'm so glad she did. Barbara had made plans to return to Skagway. She asked that store owner to hold her box for her for the next summer. However, she never did return, and we never know what happened to her. Destination of Glacier Station. Now, this is similar to Denver Station as it's a flag stop for our train. Occasionally we'll pick up and drop off hikers here looking to explore further up this valley. Now, we will be coming to a complete stop here, and I'd like to kindly remind everyone, although we'll be stopping here, there is still absolutely no crossing from car to car. And we also want everyone to remain on board this train at all times. We are 14 miles away from Skagway. That's quite a long distance to walk, especially if you're trying to make it back to your cruise ship before they leave. So it's probably in everyone's best interest to remain on board this train at all times.